I'm back, and now we're going to do our final part of this lesson on geology, and we want to talk about the surface features on Earth and other planets, and what does that tell us about what caused the surface feature. So the first one is going to be a crater. So when you see a crater, what does that tell you has happened? So a crater means that this planet has been hit by an asteroid or a comet. So an example of a crater in the United States would be Crater State Park in Arizona. And then next to it is a picture of the moon where you see an example of a crater. And what's kind of interesting is, do you see in that crater, so there's the crater, do you notice there's this little bump there in the middle of it? You wonder what made that bump? Well, you can find on the internet a picture of where they take like a glass of water, and then a single drop of water, when it hits the surface of the water does this, and then it comes back, and then there's normally a little drop of water that pops out of it. So look for something like that on the internet. So what this represents is that little dot there was material that was starting to come back up, but it got frozen in place before it had a chance to come out of the crater. Landslides. So here you have, it's kind of hard to see in that picture there, but in the picture over there to the left, you have a house, a whole lot of dirt, and then a house and a house. So that is a picture of what happens when the ground, which was up here, has an avalanche and it slides down, and it obliterated some of those houses down there. So landslides are caused by gravity. And if you look over there to the right, you see a landslide that has occurred on the moon. So again, you're going to see a picture of the crater, and then you'll notice that there's some kind of stuff right here. Well, that's the material that used to be up here in that picture. Another thing is ice. So we found out that ice can take a V-shaped valley and turn it into a U-shaped valley. So glaciers can carve up the surface of a planet. And so on the left-hand side, you've got an example of a glacier on Earth, and then on the right-hand side, you have an example of ice processes on Europa, which is a moon of Jupiter. Anytime you see a fault, then that indicates an earthquake or tectonic activity. So in that picture there, on the left-hand side, do you notice that there's this black line, and then there's this thing, and then on the other side, you see that black line again. So this black line used to be parallel with this black line, but there's been an earthquake where this material either slid down like that, or this material went up like that. So anytime you see a fault, that tells you that there's some kind of tectonic activity that has occurred. And so in the picture on the right, that's where you see those red arrows. That's indicating where there's a fault on Mercury. Volcanoes. So there are volcanoes, and anytime you see a volcano, that must mean that it's hot on the inside of the planet in order to do that. So that's a good indicator that there's either hot spots or plate tectonics. Now, it could be that it was hot spots and plate tectonics in the past, and that volcano is dormant today. So it doesn't really tell you that it's hot on the inside today, but at least it tells you it was hot on the inside in the past. And so that volcano right there on the right is called Olympus Mons, and it used to be considered the largest volcano in the solar system. but it's not anymore. So there's another place in the solar system that is more volcanic and has larger volcanoes than even Mars does. Anytime that you find mountains, that's an indication of plate tectonics, because we said that where the plates go together and they push up, then that's where you get your mountain systems from. So on the left-hand side are some mountains on Earth, and then on the right-hand side you've got some mountains on Pluto, but they're not made of rock. We'll come back to that later. Then sand dunes. Anytime that you see dunes, then that indicates there's wind activity in order to make it. So on the left-hand side are some sand dunes on Earth, and then on the right-hand side are some examples of dunes on the planet Mars. Rivers. So rivers indicate that you had liquid water flowing on the surface of that planet. So that's telling you something about the temperature of the planet, and it tells you something about the pressures on that planet. So on the left-hand side is a river system on Earth, and on the right-hand side is a dry river system on Mars. So that's an indicator that at one time Mars had flowing water. It doesn't have flowing water today, but in the past it did. And then this last one is shorelines. So anytime that you see rocks and stuff that are sticking up out of the ground and it's next to an ocean, then those rocks were formed as a result of wave action acting on those rocks. And in the picture that is on the left-hand side, that's a picture of what they thought were terraces on Mars. And so that was their proof that at one time Mars had oceans. But then later, other scientists looked at the same picture and they said, oh, those are dunes. So they're not terraces. And so it just goes to show you that sometimes the theories change. Now, later we'll talk about Mars and we'll give some evidence that at one time Mars did have oceans. All right, so we're going to take one last break, and then when we come back, we're going to do our lesson quiz. So I'll see you in just a moment.